Jesus and his 12 best friends, the disciples, came to the city of Jerusalem. The streets were very busy with people getting ready for a special festival called Passover. This was a time when Jewish people remembered how God had saved their ancestors from being slaves in Egypt a long, long time ago. Jesus knew this Passover would be different from all the others. He wanted to share one last meal with the men who had followed him, listened to his stories, and helped him with his important work. He sent two of his friends, Peter and John, ahead to find a place for them to eat together. They found a large, quiet room upstairs in a house. The room was prepared just as Jesus had said it would be. That evening, as the sun began to set over the city, Jesus and all his disciples gathered around the table. The air was filled with a mix of excitement for the festival and a feeling that something very important was about to happen. This was more than just a regular dinner. It was a time for friendship, a time for remembering God's promises, and a time for Jesus to share some final, crucial lessons with his beloved followers before his journey would take a difficult and world-changing turn. The Passover meal itself was full of meaning. Each food on the table told a part of the story of God's great rescue. There was roasted lamb, bitter herbs to remember the bitterness of slavery, and flat, unleavened bread to remember how the people had to leave Egypt in a hurry. For Jesus and his friends, sharing this meal connected them to their history and to each other. It was a tradition that had been passed down for many generations, a sacred act of remembrance and gratitude that bound them all together as a community of faith, united in their shared heritage and belief. As they sat together, Jesus looked around at the faces of his friends. He had walked with them, taught them, and shared his life with them. He loved them all very deeply. This gathering was his chance to prepare them for the confusing and sad days that were coming very soon. He wanted this evening to be a memory they could hold on to, a moment of peace and togetherness that would give them strength. This upper room became a sacred space, a sanctuary where Jesus would give his most precious final gifts to the men he had chosen to carry his message to the rest of the world. As the meal continued, Jesus did something that his friends would never forget. He picked up a piece of the flat Passover bread. He held it in his hands and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke the bread into pieces and gave a piece to each of his disciples. As he handed it to them, he said something new and surprising. "Take this and eat it," he told them gently. "This is my body, which is given for you." His friends looked at each other, trying to understand the deep meaning of his words. The bread they ate every year now had a brand new personal significance. After they had all eaten the bread, Jesus took a cup of wine from the table. The wine was also part of the Passover celebration, a symbol of joy and God's blessings. He held the cup up, once again giving thanks to God. He then passed the cup to his friends, telling them all to drink from it. As the cup went from one man to the next, Jesus explained its new meaning. "This wine is my blood," he said. "It is the blood of a new agreement, a new promise from God, which is poured out for many people so their sins can be forgiven." His words were powerful and mysterious. Jesus was telling his friends that his own life, his body, and his blood would be a sacrifice. This sacrifice would create a new relationship between God and all people, a relationship based on forgiveness and love. The old promises were being fulfilled, and a new, more wonderful promise was being made right there at the dinner table. The simple act of eating bread and drinking wine was being transformed into a sacred ceremony, a way to remember Jesus and the incredible gift he was about to give. He then said to them, "Do this to remember me." He wanted this shared meal to become a new tradition for all his followers. Whenever they would gather in the future, sharing bread and wine in this way would help them remember him, his sacrifice, and his unending love for them. It was not just about remembering a sad event, but about celebrating a new beginning and the hope of eternal life that his sacrifice would bring. This act, which Christians now call communion or the Eucharist, started that night in that quiet upper room in Jerusalem. In the middle of this special and meaningful meal, the mood in the room suddenly changed. Jesus looked at his friends with great sadness in his eyes. He said something that shocked and confused them all. "I tell you the truth," he began, his voice serious and quiet. "One of you who is eating with me right now will betray me." A wave of disbelief and sorrow washed over the disciples. How could this be possible? They were his closest followers, his trusted companions. The idea that one of them would turn against him was almost too painful to think about. Immediately, the disciples began to talk amongst themselves, their voices filled with worry and confusion. One by one, they started asking Jesus, "Is it me, Lord? Surely it is not me." Each one looked into his own heart, wondering if he could ever do such a terrible thing. The room, which had been filled with a sense of peaceful communion just moments before, was now heavy with suspicion and deep sadness. They could not imagine who among them would be capable of such a betrayal against the teacher they loved and admired so much. Peter, who was often the first to speak, motioned to John, the disciple who was sitting closest to Jesus. He wanted John to ask Jesus who the traitor was. Leaning close, John quietly asked, "Lord, who is it?" Jesus did not say the name out loud for everyone to hear. Instead, he answered in a way that only John and perhaps Peter could understand. He said, "It is the one to whom I will give this piece of bread after I have dipped it in the dish." This quiet exchange only deepened the mystery and sorrow of the moment for those who heard it. Then Jesus dipped a piece of bread and gave it to Judas Iscariot. At that moment, the terrible truth was revealed, though perhaps only to a few at the table. Jesus knew what was in Judas's heart and what he was planning to do. He was giving Judas one last chance to turn away from his dark path, but Judas had already made his choice. This sad prediction was a painful part of the evening, showing that even in this circle of close friendship, the shadows of human weakness and betrayal were present, setting the stage for the difficult events that were about to unfold. After the shocking revelation of the betrayal and the departure of Judas, Jesus turned his attention back to the faithful friends who remained with him. He knew their time together was short, and he had one final, very important instruction to give them. He looked at them with immense love and gave them what he called a new commandment. 0.3, start, 8s, end, 28s, softly blending with music. Remember this night and let love be your guide. A new command I give you. Love one another, he said. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. This was the core of his message. This command was not just a suggestion, it was the key to their future. Jesus was telling them that the most important sign of being his follower was not about having special knowledge or power, but about showing genuine, selfless love to each other. This love would be their guide and their strength in the challenging days ahead. It would be the glue that held them together as a community when he was no longer physically with them. Their love for one another would be a shining light, showing the whole world what it truly meant to follow him and live according to his teachings. Jesus was preparing his friends for a massive change. Their leader and teacher was about to be taken from them in a violent and frightening way. Their world was about to be turned completely upside down. He wanted them to remember his words and his love, not just the sorrow of his departure. The meal, the bread, and the wine were all meant to be anchors for their memory. He was giving them a way to stay connected to him and to the promises he had made. This act of remembering was not passive. It was an active choice to keep his spirit alive in their hearts and in their community. That night in the upper room marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. It was the last peaceful evening Jesus would spend with the men he had chosen. From this point forward, their lives would be filled with trial, fear, and eventually, incredible new hope. The Last Supper was a final lesson in love, sacrifice, and remembrance. It was a divine gathering that established a new covenant with humanity and equipped a small group of ordinary men with an extraordinary message of love to carry forward, changing the course of history forever.